let's work on that, right? So, how do you do that, right? Like, so let's say, I mean, like, if we take like one of the examples of, I mean, you pick an example. Let's say we're talking about these clinical trials, right? So the clinical trials, and then the problem that the big problem that's in clinical development is that, yeah, you have a drug, and then you want to do the clinical trials, and you want to find the right investigators who have the right patients who can actually do the trial, and then the trial can be done in a fast way, right? So that's the big challenge that we have. So how is your platform and like the AI, like how are you trying to solve it? How are you solving this?
The ingredients to solve that problem is knowing which physicians have eligible patient populations. Nearly impossible to know that outside the US. So you already eliminated half the world. Or not half, way more than half the world, but statistically, a lot of sites are in the US. So you eliminated the majority of the world. So, okay, great. Maybe in the US, you could say which physicians have eligible patients because there's very complex inclusion exclusion criteria. So you could
Yeah.
somewhat call that in the US.
And for people who don't know, if can you just elaborate a bit on the exclusion and inclusion
Yeah.
criteria
So
in the clinical trials? Yeah.
I'm running a clinical trial is like a new drug to cure a condition or help with a condition. If there's a cure, no patient's saying, sign me up for a clinical trial. And so if I'm working on a drug in bladder cancer, these are generally patients that have failed on current drug treatments, failed on chemotherapy, don't have other confounding conditions because you want to test if the drug actually works on bladder cancer, not on bone cancer or multiple myeloma, are between certain age groups, all these different criteria that you need to hit. And so you have to find the doctor that meets this like perfect identity painting of a patient. It's very difficult to do. And that the patient is willing to sign on an experimental drug. These are human beings, these are their lives. And so it's one, you have to find that. Now, once you find that, by the way, you got to answer the question of, does the place that the physician work have the capabilities and the facilities to do a clinical trial? Do they have research staff? Do they have an industrial refrigerator to store CAR T cells, wherever the drug is? Then you need to ask, is the physician motivated? Do they like, I work at Merck, do they like Pfizer? I work at Pfizer, do they like Merck? Then you got to ask is, have they ever run a clinical trial? Have they enrolled patients on previous clinical trials?
Hmm.
Are they working on current clinical trials? And so it's a very, those are the ingredients. Then I'm sure you put it into OpenAI, you say, is this a good doctor? Sure, good luck. That'll work well. But like those ingredients are the hard part to this problem. And that's the stuff that H1 solves.